infinite complacence, people went to and fro the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Do you like stories of the strange, the weird, and the unexplained? Of course you do. That's why I'd like you to check out Jim Harold's Campfire. Jim is one of the OGs of paranormal podcasting, and the concept of his show is pretty simple. Jim just talks to regular folks about strange stuff that happens to them for 90 minutes every week. Now, like me, he doesn't exaggerate or play a lot of spooky music. The stories speak for themselves. For example, how about the woman who almost ended up being absorbed by a painting in a mysterious bar that seemed like something out of the Twilight Zone? Or the young man who encountered a spider-like creature with baby hands? Then there was the story of a woman in England who encountered what she thought was a banshee, only to suffer a horrible tragedy before her eyes moments later. Now, not all of the stories are horrifying. Some are heartwarming, like a visit from a past loved one or a peaceful near-death experience, perhaps. But in the end, they are all true and told by ordinary people who've had extraordinary experiences. Ready to listen yet? Then tune in to Jim Harold's Campfire on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to Into the Fray. Let's do, of course, it's essentially a dog man, but down where you are in southwestern Louisiana, you guys call it the Rougarou. Of course, you didn't know that at the time, right? Like you said, you said it was 32 years ago, so obviously this was pre-podcast and everything else, and before any of these creatures were kind of a buzzword and everybody knew what they were. So I will step back and I will let you start from the beginning, and I'm excited to hear the Rougarou tale.
Okay, well, flashback to 1989. I was working summer job for an outfitter in town, and the boss, pretty well-known wildlife photographer who's local, got together and said, you know what, why don't we put together these little day tours down into the Atchafalaya Basin, which is south of here, southwest. Take them out in canoes and teach them how to shoot wildlife, cameras. And, that's a great idea. And my boss's infinite wisdom, he just sent me and another guy with 15 canoes, which we went down to Belle River, Louisiana, which is down in, Cajun country, Pier Part. But basically, you've got, there's a landing or a whole river kind of intercoastal that goes that way. Then you cross that and you're going into the swamp. What it looked like was there's very straight channels. If you go on to Google Earth and just hit Belle River, Louisiana, you can zoom in. You'll see there are very straight channels that were cut out when they were harvesting cypress trees, which were, very in demand. They still are, really. But going out into the swamp, we went about 5 miles out, and when they would dredge these channels, they would be pulling up these old seashells, and they would pile them up corners of some of these little side channels, and they'd make these little shell islands. And we found one that was about 60 feet long, 30 feet wide. I thought it'd be perfect, to set up base camp with the canoes, which I got volunteered to stay with at night. All right. So.
Oh, lucky you.
Yeah, it was luck of the draw. And I'm 19 years old. I don't give a crap. Thought it'd be fun. And so I've got the canoes. My buddy goes back to the landing because he's got to be there to wait for people and bring them up in the morning. And so we're planning on 5 days, 4 nights out there. We were going to cook lunch for them, do alligator and stuff like that. So these channels are about 100 feet wide. They're fairly deep, I guess. But where there's not these channels, the swamp can vary. At that time of year, it was probably 3 or 4 feet deep in places, maybe a little less than others. But that's going out in the trees. And you couldn't really paddle out there. You're just, it's all zigzag, but they're very, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So it's dusk one evening. Sun had pretty much gone down behind the trees, still fairly, light. It's spring, probably April or May. And so it's really not too hot yet. And I set up a little tent, and I had plenty of firewood, and I was just going to build up. And then he hands me a 45. I said, "What do I need a 45 for?" Dun, 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 dun. No, that's not what it was for. Alligators like to come up on those places. And so I might have had to cap one if one did come up and bother me. But so I got the fire going, standing there, just enjoying the scenery, really. And in front of me, it's imagine an H. There's 2 channels going on either side of me, and then connecting in between. So I'm like in between these 2 straight channels. And corner of my eye, I see, and I knew it was a dog that was dog paddling in the channel. And I see it looked like a black German Shepherd, mostly. First impression I got. The ears looked too weird, though. They're too long, pointy. Or not, it wasn't the pointy part. They're just too big. The ears are big. And it was just gliding by me. And I was like, what in the world is a dog doing out here? And why is it in the river? It didn't make sense. And it just glided. I could see the tip of the tail. Maybe it looked too far that a normal sized dog would be. And I said, what am I looking at? And it goes by me, and then it reaches the trees, which is about 100 feet away from me. And that's where the land starts coming up. Walks up, and I would say that the water was probably up to its mid-leg. And then it did the unexpected. It stood up. And that's when my mind, I was like, what in the hell am I seeing? Because it's dead quiet out there. And I heard these pops, like tree branches breaking, but I think I didn't know if it was stepping on something or if it was actually coming from it when it was standing up. But when it stood up, it didn't look like a dog that would just stand up on its hind legs, that weird look. It looked like it belonged standing straight up. It kind of grabbed had a hand on a cypress tree, and then it did the part that still kind of bothers me to this day. It turned around kind of over its shoulder and turned its shoulder just a bit to its right and looked at me. And the look on its face was, I know you see me. I want you to know that I know that you see me. And it was just, if a dog face could put disdain on it, that's what the look was. It didn't have glowing eyes or anything like that. It just looked disdainfully at me. And then it just walked off into the trees. And I could see it and I could hear it. Once it kind of would have to, but in the trees, it's uneven. It's just not flat underneath the water. You step up, you're going down. It had those bit legs. What are those called? Hocks on the back legs, which made it look really strange. the legs were bigger than they should have been, wider. It just, for years, I just really didn't know what I saw. And I didn't do drugs, wasn't drinking, but I really wish I'd had some after that. But I was terrified, and I wanted to open up a big ass can of Dawn, but I was stuck. I had no way of getting back, and we didn't have those little radios back then. And so here I am, 5 miles out into the Atchafalaya with God knows what creeping around. That swims and walks and God knows what else it did. So I stayed up all night next to the fire with that 1911 Colt 45 in my hand, looking like Colonel Kurtz probably from Apocalypse Now. With my eyes, I was looking everywhere. I had my head on a swivel, every sound. When you're out there at night, you're hearing stuff that you don't hear anywhere else. It's a whole different world. So it was a long night. So the next morning when my buddy gets out there, he's bringing people out and we start going out in the canoes. And I was looking at the spot where the dog man, whatever, the Rougarou, got up and walked out or walked through back into the trees. I had a paddle and I measured it down about 3 foot paddle. And then I went up to where I saw where the head would have been. And best estimate I could get was about 6.5, 7 feet tall, maybe. And the hands, that's what I wanted to tell you. They weren't paws. They weren't long fingers. They were more like claws on a paw, 4 of them. And then I think the little one on the side, but that's because it rested its hand up there when it turned. And so we're talking a black German Shepherd head. The shoulders were fairly wide. I wish I could have seen it from the front when it was dog paddling. I only saw it from the side. And so I couldn't get a gauge on what it looked like, how it was doing it. If it was doing a classic dog paddle or more of a breaststroke, I just really couldn't tell. But the way that the physiology looked when it stood up, and it was those popping noises. I was wondering if that's what it was coming from, it moving to stand up. It was, because I snap, crackle, and pop when I stand up now, and but I didn't know if it was just changing the mechanism for it to go from foreleg, up to standing up. So I got a good idea. I was just kind of bomb blasted that whole day, and I didn't tell anybody because it would just be insane. And I'd never heard of anything like that. And when we went into town that night to get some stuff, and we're talking down there where people speak French to each other. That's just what they do. And I was trying to say, anybody heard these big dogs out there? And they jibber jabbered a little bit and said, I heard Rougarou. I said, Rougarou. It made no sense to me. And so it wasn't until maybe 2010 when I really started listening to podcasts that I even heard the name Dog Man. When I started looking into it, I can't remember that guy's name. Vic Cundiff? Yeah, Vic Cundiff. And I listened to some of his stuff, and I was like, well, that has to be what I saw. And they seem to be everywhere. They don't seem to have a geologic or geographical limit of what states they're in. But in Louisiana, it's just not the Rougarou or Dogman that you've got creeping around. You've got Bigfoot. Imagine a line that goes from east to west in Louisiana that basically with Baton Rouge in the middle of the line. North of Baton Rouge, it's hilly, or it gets a little hillier. Forest, lots of forest, and there's plenty of Bigfoot sightings all around Louisiana. Up off to the west, in Texas and the Big Thicket, Mississippi and Alabama. But south of Louisiana, or south of Baton Rouge, it's mainly just swamp, but there's a lot of land alongside rivers, little towns and that have you. So when I figured out, well, that had to have been what I seen, and I was confused with some people saying they're some that look like wolves, some have German Shepherd type heads, or the Anubis type, Doberman types, and so it's fascinated me ever since, and I do not want to see one again. It really creeped me out. I think I could deal with a Bigfoot more than I could deal with that again. But have you ever heard of somebody seeing one swimming?
I have not, and that was actually the very first point that I was going to make, because that was the first thing I kind of wrote down, like with stars all over, like bring this back up. Maybe but it sounds like you listen to a lot of these other Dogman encounter shows more than I do. I mean, the funny thing about starting a podcast is because you love podcasts, then you don't have enough time to listen to them anymore. And truth be told, I don't really listen to a whole lot. So I will flip that. I certainly haven't. Have you heard of anybody else saying that they've heard or seen a swimming Dogman?
No, I haven't. Not that I've listened to, and I do listen to a lot. And Wes Germer's show, I love that one about the Sasquatch, and he's got a few Dogmen. And I just can't find anything on the internet about it. It just looks weird. I mean, I've had dogs all my life, and they love to swim. It didn't look like that. But what was weird when it was going by, it didn't look at me. The eyes didn't turn. It just went, just swam, and then it waited to look at me when it got up on its legs and walked off. So I kind of got the impression that, from what I could gather from the guys down at the landing, that they don't really talk about it. It's very superstitious. If you watch that show, or if you've ever seen the guys that go down alligator hunting, I can't swamp. It's really right there is where I was, where they go. So I'm sure they don't. I've never heard them mention anything like that on their show, but it was just so strange and creepy, and I'd spend 4 more nights out there. And I didn't see it again, but I just kind of it was just going from point A to point B, and I happened to see it.
Man, you finished out the trek, and so was it you every night having to stay there, or did you guys switch off? No,
I didn't mind being out there because it was a lot less work.
Gotcha.
All I had to do was sit there.
Just to reiterate that very strange point that you made, that it swam right by you, which I have a question about that in a second. It swims right by you, doesn't acknowledge you, waits until it makes this big show about getting out of the water before it turns around like, oh, I know you see me. How's it going? Good luck sleeping tonight.
Yeah.
So how close was its closest point to you?
30 feet when it swam by.
30 feet?
30 feet, yeah.
Wow.
Because that channel's not that wide. It was probably from the Shell Island to the other side of the trees was 60, so he was in the middle. And I'm going by baseball lengths. I know what 60 feet is, 90 feet.
Right.
So I knew, and actually I got on Google Earth and looked down there and used the measuring tool, and it was 100 feet wide, the channel. So distances are perfect, and it's in New Orleans. They do talk about the Rougarou in a way that they say it is like a werewolf, where it does change from human to dog, or to the wolf. And then, or wolf, I'm sorry, that's how you say it, right?
Yeah, I omit the L completely.
I love it too. It's like the Scottish with golf.
That's right.
So, and then there's the dog man that does not seem to, it's always in that state. That's just the way it is. So New Orleans is kind of the vampire type. They do believe in vampires down there, believe me. And the Rougarou has been sighted in the city of New Orleans, but I think it's when they're talking about the werewolf type that do change. And when my brother lived in uptown New Orleans in a haunted house, and that whole town is just bizarre. If somebody says they're a voodoo priestess, you just take it at face value and try not to piss them off. Because it's all real. I'm telling you.
Yeah, you want to stay on those people's good side. Something that I wanted to ask you is the whole popping sounds thing also stood out to me because, and I think that this just recently came up again, and I don't know if you've heard me mention this or maybe you actually heard this episode, but it was the episode with D. Doss. Don't remember which episode that was. But when he had...
I know who D-Doss is.
Yeah, the Dogman experience where it was outside of his truck. And he said that basically when it went from its crouching position to a standing position, that it was making some truly loud, cracking, popping sounds from that's what's coming from its joints. And he just says, basically he'll never forget that really odd sound. So that also stood out to me when you said that.
Wow. Because like I said, it could have been, I didn't know if it was stepping on tree branches, but yeah, it was pops. Yeah, it was when it was standing up. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yeah, I remember D-Doss's show. Yeah, the Dogman, Bigfoot, whatever project. Yeah, I never heard that, but that is bizarre. So I guess I don't know how many people see these things go from all fours to standing up. I wonder how prevalent that is, or if it,
right?
Because it's got to do it. I mean, it's got to make some. It just can't go from that to that. Because Bigfoot, from what I understand, can go all fours and run and just stand right up and not miss a beat. I think these things have to do a little transformer stuff, tick, 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 and then go. But the look it gave me, I've heard you talk about. They just don't care. They're not hiding. They're just, they don't care.
Well, and I'm sure you've also heard then that people will get, and sometimes it's before they even see the creature, they'll get this overwhelming feeling of dread. And then once they see it, they just think it's pure evil. Did you get any sense of that? I mean, you did stay out there 4 more nights, so maybe you didn't, but.
Yeah, I know. Well, I didn't. It was just the look that it gave me was, you're pathetic. I didn't get the feeling of dread at all. That's probably why I was able to stay out there, but I probably could have convinced myself I didn't see it, but no, it was there and it did what I saw it do, and I never saw it again. But that place is so vast and there's nothing but stuff to eat. And there are large areas of dry ground. You can run into a town out there and there's a lot of houseboat camps, not a lot, but they just parked all along in those bayous. So the people I would like to talk to, if I ever had go back down there to really look into it, would be the people that have the camps out there, because they would know it the most. Wow. Golly.
Yeah. And so you mentioned it had huge legs. Now, what did the upper body look like?
They weren't dog legs. Okay. So when it stood up out of the water, it didn't have a butt like a Bigfoot or something like that you would imagine. It wasn't as wide as I thought it would be. When I hear other people talk about dogmen, they say that they're very muscular and have almost human-like proportions. No, this didn't. It didn't have exceptionally wide shoulders, but they were I would say they had shoulders, or it had shoulders that if it wanted to could throw, overhand. not like a dog where it locks right there.
Right.
It could move its arms.
Right.
And but the legs, it wasn't just overly huge. Now it could have been a juvenile, I don't know, but it just didn't. I've heard some people describe them as almost like a Bigfoot, but with a dog's head. But then I've heard different types, so I don't know. Some of that kind of confuses me. Yeah, that was just strange. So you've been into this a little longer than I have. When did dogmen start really popping up in people's vocabulary and people talking about it?
I mean, I could guess, but I'd probably be wrong, and I'm sure a lot of people would be screaming at their devices at me. But I mean, it's been quite a long time. I mean, you've had cases on shows like Paranormal Witness. You ever see that episode?
Mm-hmm.
The one where they're out and he keeps going. What is he? He keeps. I haven't seen this in forever. He keeps going back out to his truck or something, and they're just surrounded. It's like surrounded by, Wolfman or dog, whatever the heck it was. I need to go back and watch that episode, but it's definitely been in the lexicon for quite a long time now, I would say. But if I tried to guess the year, I'd probably be way off. But I do like the fact that, I'm sorry, but it just seems like with corroborating evidence, like they don't give a crap, they're not shy. They go where they want. They do what they want. We've got weird little things like the joints popping, which I really find interesting that you brought that up, because I have heard that before, and I know others have as well.
Really?
Yeah, I just think that's really strange. But I would like people to reach out and I will forward this to you if I get it. Reach out, guys, if you've heard of another case where someone has seen one of these things swimming. We've heard of swimming Bigfoot before, but a swimming dogman Rougarou is pretty dang cool. So I want to hear more about that. Now, Christopher, how, kind of a small detail. I have other questions, obviously, but a small detail. How long was the tail, or what did the tail look like once it was out of the water?
Well, it was dripping wet. It did have a tail. That I know. I don't know what it would have looked like dry as it was bushy, but it was, I guess, 2 feet long, maybe 2-3 feet long. It wasn't long like some dogs have, but it was definitely a tail, and it was, I guess, where the butt would be. It was just weird looking. What was that I'm thinking about? I was talking about the hands. That I guess they're hands. It had. I think they were very short fingers, but they had claws on the end, long nails, something like that. But I remember it when it was holding on to that tree when it turned and looked, and I was like, God. Those things could just rip you half and half. I had read one of the most interesting things, and this would be something that would happen in Louisiana. These, I don't know what show it was. I think 3 people were in a church, abandoned church, and they saw a dog man, and they creeped, and they were hiding, and they saw it sniffing around outside, and then there was a well, and more of them started coming up out of the well in a graveyard. Now, I do know that Anubis was the guardian of the underworld or something like that in Egyptian lore. But they said that they looked like Anubis or Doberman pinchers that were crawling out of the well. God, that was the most interesting show, one I've ever listened to, and it was been so long ago. And the legs, imagine, I would say that they were like a man's leg size, not muscular, like big thighs and calves. They were just like a person's legs, maybe a little more defined because it was wet, and it didn't shake off. That's one thing I do remember. It didn't shake off. A dog when they get out of the water. Didn't do that. Just stood up drifting.
That was probably his way of saying, how dare you call me a dog man? See, he says, I don't shake when I get out of the water, so how could I be a dog man? Now, what about, okay, so it gets out of the water and it turns just its head basically enough to look at you. Like, you didn't get a really good view of the chest, right? At all.
No. Okay, so it had its right hand on the cypress tree, and it turned its shoulders a bit, maybe 3/4, and turned its head over to look at me, and pretty much square on. So it turned its upper body back. So the way it turned its body, I'd be looking straight at it, and I'd just look from its side.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't see chest. I didn't see the way it looked from the front at all. No. But when it walked off, it really just looked like a person walking off.
Very comfortable on two legs.
Very extreme. Yeah, very comfortable. I would have loved to have known what the feet looked like, though.
Anything else interesting or noteworthy about the head or the face?
Well, like I said, I thought the ears were a little too big, long, tall, whatever, and extremely pointy. I think most German Shepherds have the kind of rounded tip at the top. These were pointy. So that's what made it not look completely like a German Shepherd. Just the front face of it did. It looked just like a German Shepherd. The front, the snout, even I didn't see teeth. He didn't bare teeth at me. I say he. Yeah, but it was the ears that they stood out when it was swimming, because that's really what caught my eye. Really, it was because it had a wake coming from the back, but see, the water is so dark out in the bayou. I mean, it's really just pitch dark. And so if you put your hand down in the water a foot, you can't see your hand. So I couldn't see what it looked like from the top down, really, until it got out of the water. But I didn't see the feet, the legs, like I said, that looked like a person's legs, except for the hock part. Is that what it's called, a hock?
There's an actual scientific name for that backwards part, and I always forget it. But yeah, I know what you're talking about, and so will the listeners. Yeah,
I didn't understand how it could walk like that with hocks, or with it bent, but it just looked natural when it walked. I think it's almost an optical illusion because their ankles are in a different spot with dogs, and that's why they have that bent part. But it just walked like a person. I mean, it was just bizarre, and I'm so glad I didn't get the feeling of dread, because I probably would have had to quit, because they would have said, no, you're staying out there.
Right.
I saw a dog stand up and walk off. Oh, then you're just going to have to go home and get drug tested.
Right. If you can't hack it and you're coming up with this to get out of work, yeah, you're gone, buddy. Oh, they're like,
I would
wow.
have been better off with a UFO.
Yeah, no kidding. They're like, wow, Chris, that's how badly you don't want to stay out here, huh? Dog man. Okay. Okay, now I think I already know the answer to this, but this is just to kind of jog things around. Let's go back to the swimming part for a minute, if we could. Mm-hmm. Now, you said you saw the head and the ears, and that's what stood out, but you also saw the tip of the tail sticking out, which I'm assuming, like you, means that it was doggy paddling. But is it possible, because you said that it was like maybe 3 or 4 feet deep in some parts, that it was actually walking with it, like it was actually standing up underwater and just using its hind legs and walking through?
No, because those channels, which they have cut out, are deep. It's about 30 feet deep,
gotcha.
30, 40 feet.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that takes care of that.
Then when it gets up to the tree line is where, because they dredged those out, okay? So those aren't natural waterways down in that part. So, and they're very straight. They're straight as an arrow if you look on Google Maps. When when you get up to the trees, it varies in depth from 3 maybe to a foot, so, but, you just can't see in front of you, so you can't get out of your canoe and walk through those trees, and you're not going to know if you're going to hit a 7-foot hole. So, you stay in your boat, which I didn't hear. I've never heard anybody on any shows talk about howling like a werewolf does. I know Bigfoots do that, but there's all kind of critters down there that make god-awful noises. I got a lot of like bobcats and stuff down there. So any animal that I heard, it's here. It's here, that son of a bitch. Boy, am I glad I didn't get that feeling of dread.
Yeah, that would have sucked. Because I know you've heard that if you've been listening to, especially like, Vic's show and some of these other Dogman encounters, some people just, they get the feeling like it's nothing but 100% pure evil, and it's something that they just never forget. And you already can't forget your sighting. How could you, right? What about, and I appreciate the fact that you took your paddle and you were measuring stuff and you have your numbers down. Did it leave any tracks behind over there?
No, because there wasn't any dry land. It was walking in the water. So there's no way I could have seen any tracks. And I just took note of basically where its hand was, because the hand was shoulder height, and so the head would have been about a foot taller. So I knew basically where its tip of its head was. So I guessed 6.5 to 7 feet tall. So I'm 6'3", and so it was about a foot taller than me, I would imagine. So
you had that 45. If it really had come after you, do you think that would have been enough to stop it?
I don't think I would have been able to hit it, because I'd really never shot a gun before.
Oh, that doesn't help.
No, I've heard that it really doesn't matter. I've never heard of anybody even saying they've killed one before. People are always saying they've killed a Bigfoot, but I've never heard of a dogman getting taken down. But I don't know. I doubt it. So if it had gotten on land, the closest it could have been would be just a few feet to 60 feet, so I may have just had a coronary and dropped right there. Who knows?
Maybe if you were lucky. But, I mean, I probably would rather have that than have to fight the dog man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's jeez Louise. Trying to think. I jotted some stuff down that I wanted to make sure you knew where it was, so you could look at it on a map and you get a really good idea of what I'm talking about as the lay of the land down there, where there's dry land and swamp, dry, so there's any number of places it could just sit, and there's nothing but game out there. Towns, could go into little towns and do whatever I want. But I always wondered, if it was dog paddling, if that thing got out of the water like a dog on all 4 legs, what it would look like. If it could pass for just a really big dog,
I mean, do you think that it could?
I don't know, because I didn't see it. Well, because part of it was in the water when it started standing up. It probably could, but it was just too big to be a regular dog. Somebody would say, well, that's a damn big dog. Who knows? They could possibly, yeah. I would imagine it could walk around a town at night, at night, and just pass as a real big dog going down the street.
Well, and I think what would help that one specifically would be the fact that it didn't look like one of these more maybe Anubis-looking types or something. Its head seemed a little bit more like you said, like a German Shepherd's head on this massive, very strange, strangely shaped body. That's interesting that maybe, like you said, if it was at night or, out under a street light somewhere and X amount of feet away, someone would just go, holy crap, that's just a huge dog. What kind of dog is that? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure that's happened and people didn't give it a second glance.
All right. So I know that
it.
since we're going to be, after this, we're going to be talking about some other types of subjects. Obviously, I wanted to run something by you, and this is, at least for right this moment, this is my last question about this encounter. Okay. I was listening recently to Dark Waters, and he said that he has mentioned a number of times. I don't know if he just recently came to this conclusion or if this is something he's always said. I don't know. But he said, I told you guys that there is a demonic element to Dogman. And he said it a couple times. I told you guys that. I told you that. And what you said earlier was actually a perfect segue into that. And it is true because I haven't heard one either. You said we've heard before, not a lot, but we've heard before of people shooting or claiming to have taken down a Bigfoot. But we've never heard of that with a Dogman. So does that tie in to what Dark Waters is saying, that there is actually a demonic element to these creatures? What are your, and it's just conjecture, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I've heard some of his stuff, and I'm pretty sure he's a New Orleans boy, or, local down there, or from somewhere around the Gulf Coast. Is he?
Yeah, I think he is down in New Orleans, if I he's
right. got that accent, yeah. Yes, I think that there is definitely something supernatural about them because of the fact that they can really, it's not like they're throwing infrasound at you and making you sick. They are getting people terrified by some means, and you can't do that with infrasound, from what I understand. It can just make you sick and just, debilitate you for a little bit. I am intrigued when I hear people always, they say the glowing eyes sometimes, and it's usually always amber or red, which is not a good color, obviously, for eyes. Yeah, I kind of get the feeling that they've got, they're either a vessel for something or they are demonically tied in somehow. Most people down in this neck of the woods are Catholic. They take that stuff real seriously, so they tend to throw anything that is out of the ordinary into the realm of the underworld somehow.
Right.
So they just do. But I think he might be right, because I've even heard some people say they can throw thoughts into your head, not mind speak, but I was looking, some guy was hunting, and this deer stopped and is looking not at him, but over his shoulder, and he looks over and there's a dog man standing there, and he hears in his head, "Take the shot." Like I was waiting for him to do it so he can go get it lunch. But that sounds more like, do it. I'm hungry, and do it for me and I'll go get it. What are your thoughts? Because I really don't have enough information to make even a conjecture other than the feeling that I get from what I hear.
Yeah, and that's okay, because nobody really does, because that's all we have are just guesses, right? But I don't know. I'm kind of in the same boat, and it's no different than the Bigfoot stuff, because I'll have people on here that are telling stories that are just, nothing is a normal encounter, obviously, if you're talking about Bigfoot or Dogman, but, sometimes they fit into this nice little flesh and blood box over here. That's quite the visual to think about. The flesh and blood box over here. And then other times, we're there, we're doing the thing here, and then there's wrenches that get thrown into certain stories, and you're going, what in the, how, like, why? I don't know. And honestly, I don't think that anyone has the answers. Nobody does. So
what intrigues me, and just to the nth degree, is these Bigfoot researchers, they go at each other's throats, which bothers me. I don't really get onto those Facebook pages except to see, videos and stuff. But the people that have been out doing it for 30 years, the longer they do it, the more they almost just say, I give up, because they're starting to figure out that it's not the way it seems.
Right.
It's not all flesh and blood, but it's not, there's the lights, the glowing lights, the orbs, and they seem to be around those. It goes from a purely seeming like a flesh and blood animal that's just mitochondrial related as a human and an unknown primate, and that's that, to on the other side of the fence, the really weird that just cannot be explained.
Well,
and it's not blended in together. It's just one or the other.
Yeah. Well, and actually my very last episode would be a perfect example of that, where you have very run-of-the-mill activity, things going on around camp that seems like, regular Bigfoot creature type stuff. And then on the way out, you have you have these sets of glowing eyes, glowing from the inside. And I asked him, well, these aren't creatures under the sea with bioluminescent anything. How does that happen? And he says, I don't know. And of course we don't. But that's a perfect example of just a really strange element to what would have been a very clear-cut flesh and blood Bigfoot story.
Or the best example for me, are the trackways that just disappear. They just stop.
Mm-hmm.
And people try to say, well, it just backtracked. It's walking. My God. No, they just up and flat out disappear. And that is just so interesting. And then we've got people like Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who studied, that's his PhD, thesis or whatever, is locomotion, bipedal locomotion. And when he saw a cast, he's like, this came from a living creature. This 21-inch cat, he knew what to look for. He knows exactly what's happening. He gives, he threw his reputation out there and he gets trashed, and I'm probably sure he doesn't have tenure anymore, but he knows what he's talking about. And I wish more scientists would come outside the box and not be faculty and their college, coming down on them, and to say, look, this is something worth studying. It's obviously, there's elements of here that are true evidence, of a walking creature. And why don't we look into it a little more? And when they start getting into the government conspiracies and all that, I'm sure the government knows, or some branch of the government knows about it, and they want to keep it quiet, because if Bigfoot did all of a sudden become proven and body shows up somewhere and before it gets taken away, everywhere outside would become its habitat. It would have to be protected because they are people, that's the only thing I can think of why they have to keep it quiet.
Well, I just want someone to ask, and maybe they already have, and I just haven't caught it. I want someone to ask Dr. Meldrum what he thinks about Dogman. He may think it's completely ridiculous, but I don't know, because he doesn't think Bigfoot's so stupid. So who knows? Really cool Rougarou story, Christopher. Love that one. And please,
Thanks.
guys, if you have come across an article, legitimate, like a blog post somewhere, or of course a podcast, whatever it is, send it along. We would love to see more of these swimming Dogman stories. But Christopher, thank you so much for being willing to come on and chat with me, and of course reaching out in the first place, and choosing me to talk to. I really appreciate that.
Well, I really enjoyed it. Like I said, you're an excellent interviewer, and I can appreciate that, because it's a very difficult thing to do. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I hope some people, if it jogs some memories about if anybody has seen one or didn't want to talk about it, at least they'll just reach out. Yeah, I've seen one swim.
Yes, exactly.
I would really like to see what they say.
Well, yeah, Christopher, if you don't mind sticking around for some other creepy down south encounters and sharing those, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little biography. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. is when you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.